will open the symposium with a talk entitled The Awakening of Consciousness. Yuri Castro holds a doctoral degree in clinical psychology and specializes in the treatment of severe mental illnesses in both adolescents and adults. Since 2012, he has also been active as a spiritist speaker. Yuri is a volunteer at the Conscious Living Spiritist Group in North Miami, Florida, and currently he serves as the marketing director of the United States Spiritist Federation. Yuri also has a Spiritist podcast called Spiritist Companion. We would like to welcome Yuri Castro.
All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 19th Symposium of the USSF. They gave me the big responsibility of being the first one to come up here and talk to you guys, to set the tone for the other speakers and for the conference as a whole. The good thing is that nobody can say I copied anybody else's work, because I said it first. Joking aside, it's such a pleasure and such an honor and a joy to be able to be gathered here today, seeing so many faces and the smiles. And I just want us to rejoice in this banquet of light in the form of words, in the form of looks, form of handshakes, hugs, that we're all already receiving and will continue to receive throughout the day. As we talk about a topic that is so important in our lives nowadays, the evolution of consciousness, particularly my talk, the awakening of consciousness. I would like us to go back and try to imagine these questions, or try to hear these questions that have been echoing for so long in our lives and in our heads. Why are we here? What is the meaning of life? Who are we? These are questions that have long been in our minds, and by long I mean in other lives as well. And as humanity is growing and is evolving, consciousness follows that path as well. Evolving with humanity, evolving to understand who we are, what we're doing here, and the purpose of life. Nowadays, as it was said already, we live in a world that all we have to do is go outside or open the news and we're going to see turmoil. We're going to see violence. We're going to see war. We're going to see divisiveness. We're going to see all these things that are afflictions, both individual and collective. And we may question ourselves, what's happening? Is this part of a plan? Because it doesn't look good. But thankfully, we have Spiritism that came to us in the 19th century with Allan Kardec codifying the words of the spirits, of the higher spirits, in the book, The Spirits Book, which inaugurated the Spiritist movement in 1857. And with that came the promised consoler. With that came the promised consoler that Jesus had mentioned. With that came the answers that not only consoled, but were also rational to the questions that have been with us for a while. Consciousness in itself is the compass that will help us in this journey, that has already helped us in this journey as we evolve, as we try to understand why we're here, who we are, and the purpose of life. As we look around and we see, like I said, turmoil, war, violence, moral confusion, as we see all these things, it will, and it already helps us make sense of these things that before we didn't have an answer, or the answer, we couldn't necessarily hear it because the answer was already said 2,000 years ago. The real answer was already said a while back. But the history of humanity shows us that this process is definitely not a simple process. This process of the evolution of consciousness, and I love that we don't have that image here, but behind the QR code, I love that we have a staircase when we're talking about the evolution of consciousness. And that's what it is. Step by step, going up, progressing. because the law of progress with capital L is the law of God, and we can delay it or we can speed it up, but we cannot stop it. It's happening. It will continue to happen, but it's step by step, as the staircase that we have right there. Going back to perhaps more ancient times, or even if we go to the teachings in the gospel according to Spiritism, another book by Allan Kardec from 1864, we will see that before, we're going to learn that the spirit was created simple and ignorant. This is also in the Spirit's book, the other one that I mentioned, questions 100. There's different answers that have that. So answers to question 155, 133, and other questions will tell us that as spirits, as immortal spirits, we were created simple and ignorant. So with simplicity and ignorance, these are two qualities that they say, and they repeat that over and over and over. So if we look and we say, okay, we were created simple and ignorant with these two qualities, then how do we progress? How do we evolve? How does that process happen? At first, we learn we're moved by instincts, by sensations as humans. So we tried all the way thousands and thousands of years ago to find shelter, to find food, to fend off enemies. Those are our concerns. But as we slowly progressed, and I say we as spirits, as immortal spirits, we slowly progressed. We started to see other things. We started to look to the skies, look at the stars, and started to think there must be something bigger than us. There must be something greater than us. And we started to develop different names for different gods, the fire, the wind, all these natural elements. They became part of a divinity, part of the divine, because our consciousness was still in a state of infancy. So it could not comprehend God. So we started to name different things and say, this is the God for this, God for that, which already denoted this view that there was something greater, and there is. But we continue to progress, and as slowly but surely intelligence started to develop as well. And with intelligence came philosophy, came science. We started to become better in agriculture. We started to improve in all those areas of our lives. And we started to also improve in the notion of God, singular now, one God, one intelligent being that created us, our Father in heaven. So we progress through that, and intelligence continues to progress. With it, perhaps laying behind, is moral progress as well, moral consciousness, this moral awareness of God. And in the Spirit's book, question 621, they're going to say, where are the laws of God written? In the conscience. And I think it's one of the staple questions, one of my favorite questions and answers in the Spirit's book. In the conscience. Therefore, the awakening of consciousness and the evolution of consciousness by extent is something that is already within us. Consciousness as this moral compass is already within us, because the laws of God of what's right and wrong, they are written in us. And I love that, because it means that each one of us has access to that. Each single one of us has access to those laws. We've always had. But the thing is, in an infancy or in an infant state of the Spirit, we didn't have that comprehension. We couldn't comprehend. We couldn't apply. Now we're starting to comprehend more and more. And the application, therefore, becomes the next challenge. And that's where the moral progress is going to come. But consciousness, and I wanted to bring two definitions of consciousness, especially because this is the part of the whole symposium today. The Oxford Dictionary says that it's an internal knowledge or conviction, the state or fact of being mentally conscious or aware of something. And this other dictionary, the Merriam-Webster, is going to say the quality or state of being aware, especially of something within oneself. This is devoid of any religious connotation. Being aware of something within oneself, and it's going to say the state or fact of being conscious of an external object, state, or fact. So even something like the English language, we look at the dictionary semantics, we see that it's already pointing to something that's within ourselves. And that is the compass, that is the north that I want us all to have in mind. That consciousness, according to spiritist perspective, perhaps we can say that is this inner perception of self and the divine law, of looking in our conscience and knowing what is right, what is wrong, and following that. Because a lot of the times we do know what's right and wrong, but it's actually doing what's right that's hard. But as we evolve as spirits, we learn, of course, that the awakening of consciousness, it's something that doesn't happen like that. We have, I mentioned the staircase in the image. It happens gradually, step by step, slowly, but surely. And this awakening also happens on an individual level and on a collective level. Because even though we're all here, and I like to say on the same boat called Earth, we're all in the same boat. We have come here with unique trajectories. Each spirit is unique. So we came here, and we are here right now, the incarnate one and the discarnate ones, with our own set of credits and debts. We are here with our own qualities and defects, helping each other, helping ourselves. Individually, when there's the awakening of the consciousness, it means that we are more aligned with the laws of God. We're more aligned with doing what's right. Because for so many years, so many centuries, for so many millennia, I dare say, we here, 2025, I dare say that we probably didn't do what was right. I risk saying that without offending anyone. Because we're still here talking about Jesus. We're still here trying to understand, internalize, introject all his teachings and apply them. Because that's so hard. That bridge between knowledge and application is very, very hard. Individually, we awaken at different times as well. If we look back into the history of humankind, we see so many martyrs, so many saints. We see people that walked with Jesus, heard him for years, but didn't have that full awakening. Whereas we have somebody like Paul of Tarsus before Saul of Tarsus on the road to Damascus and the awakening that he had. We have Mary, who was living a life of sin and of material pleasures, awaken her consciousness, understanding what the laws of God were and applying that in her life. Collectively, we awaken through the individual pieces of the puzzle, through the individual awakenings. And the image I want you to have is of this street, let's say the city, that's engulfed in darkness. And we go to a specific street and we look at one lamppost. That one lamppost all of a sudden illuminates, becomes light. It's going to illuminate the street a little bit, all those around. Slowly but surely the lampposts start to all illuminate themselves. And we have a bright street. The street next to that does the same thing over and over and over. And we have a city that is fully illuminated. That is the image that I have when I think of illuminating our inner temple, our inner sanctuary, doing what's right according to the awakening of our consciousness on an individual level that will also have its projection on a collective level. And then we can all become these lampposts that illuminate the way. These lighthouses that illuminate treacherous waters. We can all become that. But there are instruments to this awakening because it's not easy to awaken the consciousness. We are here 2025, still going through that process, which is okay because we're all evolving. But it's not easy, and there are many instruments to this awakening. Afflictions and sufferings perhaps being the bitter medicine to help us awake the consciousness. Like I said, we look outside. It was said here in the beginning as well. War, crisis, turmoil. And each one of us carry their own set of afflictions, individuals. But these afflictions are the goads, which is a word that spirit author Emmanuel, who wrote through Chico, likes to use. Goads as in Goads, which is this pointy object used in agriculture to make the cattle go forward whenever the cattle stops its work. So the farmer pokes the cattle and the cattle continues to go. We have this suffering in our world as goads, both individually and collectively, because oftentimes we have deviated from what's right. We have deviated from what our conscience was saying was what we must do. And now we must continue the progress. So the affliction, the suffering works as this goad, this poking instrument that propels us forward. The sickness, the afflictions, the suffering that we see, both individually and collectively as well. Reincarnation. We will talk about reincarnation too, so I don't want to steal Legion's thunder. But reincarnation is also this process by which we are able to continue the awakening of our consciousness. By the process by which we come back here when we reincarnate with a list of things that we must do better. We talk about in Spiritist lectures, trials and expiations or atonements. Trials are these things, these challenges that the soul welcomes to work on the virtues, the true treasures, the virtues, the ones that are not going to be corroded. No thieves can steal the virtues: patience, charity, benevolence, indulgence, tolerance. We accept these trials and we reincarnate. We also have expiations. We also have atonements, which is the corrective path that we must take because we deviated from it. So the suffering a lot of the times is a form of expiation, but it can also be a form of trial that the spirit welcomes, so it must endure and it must improve. Because, like I said before, the law of progress with capital L is unstoppable. We may speed it up or we may delay it. But these instruments of awakening are all part of the love that our Creator has for us, that God has for us. His laws are written in our conscience. But the God that we talk about here is a God of love, a God that gives us the opportunity to repent. What did Jesus say in the Lord's Prayer? He talked about repentance, about forgiveness. So our God is a God that is infinitely just, fair, loving, kind, perfect in all its qualities. So if we look around and we see suffering, we see afflictions, we must have within us the certainty that everything has a purpose, and everything that seems out of order for our material eyes is actually within the divine order. As much as it looks like everything is lost, as much as sometimes we may feel hopeless, overwhelmed, we must have that faith within us that everything is going according to divine justice. Because if God was unjust, even a little, if God made me have everything that I have, live where I live, and he made someone else live in famine in Africa or in a war in Middle East, what type of God is that? Where's the fairness in that? So he prefers some children over. No, that is incompatible, rationally speaking. For that, I recommend the book that completed 160 years this year, Heaven and Hell, by Allan Kardec. And this topic of divine justice. And in that book, we can also see the awakening of consciousness, because there are testimonies of spirits in that book, Heaven and Hell, 1865, by Allan Kardec, where these spirits come after they discarnate and they come to provide their testimonies and say all the things that they found out that they were wrong, but now that they know. And they come to help us progress. And then we can also think about what Marcella was saying, the beautiful prayer in the beginning, about Jesus, the age of Jesus. Because as we see also in question 625 of the Spirit's book, when they ask what is the perfect, is there a perfect type that God has ever sent humankind as a model and guide? One word, that's their answer: Jesus. He is the one who came all those years ago, taught all those things that we're still trying to apply today. He was the one who came and said, And this is relates to awakening of consciousness. When he awoke our consciousness by saying, tooth by tooth, an eye for an eye, forget about that. We can do better. We should do better. And he started to do a list of things through all his ministry that only lasted 3 formal years, because he was already doing it before even he was younger. He was already teaching in his own way. But throughout only 3 years, he taught so many things. He was the model and our guide. He was the most, and it still is the most perfect spirit that has ever walked the planet, that has ever walked this earth. So we don't need to look too far to find our model and our guide. We don't need to look too far to see where and how we can awaken our consciousness, where and how we can look inside our own conscious and see what is good, what is bad, and what's the road to follow. He provided us that north in the compass. He provided us that. But question 919, again from the Spirit's book, talk about moral progress lagging behind intellectual progress. What is the obstacle to moral progress, they ask. And the spirits are going to say 2 words. They asked obstacle, and they're going to say 2 obstacles, and I love that piece. Selfishness and pride. The two scourges of our moral development. We joke, we call them the evil twins. Selfishness and pride, because those are the things that still stop us from truly awakening our consciousness, from following these laws of God, but it's part of the process. Slowly but surely, we try to get rid of selfishness and pride through afflictions, through suffering, through trials and atonements. We are slowly but surely getting rid of the evil twins. But it does take some time, because evolution is gradual. There are no leaps in nature. It was already said hundreds of years ago, and it's very much applicable. So knowing thyself, actually, that's question 919. What is the best way to do this moral, to do this moral transformation? Know thyself. They say a sage of, like from ancient times already told you, know thyself. So knowing ourselves. Why? Because when we look inward, when we have the courage to look inward, to know ourselves, we see what we must improve on. We see what we have perhaps carried with us as a heavy burden from previous lives, and we bring it to this life right here. So we must deal with that. We look around us, those who share the same roof with us, those are the people we must be with. And then we know ourselves, looking inward and doing the moral transformation that we must do. But again, this process is gradual. The awakening of consciousness following what we must follow is very much gradual, but it's something that we must do. We have been doing, but like I said, we can speed it up, or we can delay it. So the question becomes, why delay it? It's not easy. It takes courage. It takes, again, looking inward and trying to fight selfishness and pride, which still drive us, because we're still very much attached to matter. The more we evolve, the more it's going to be the spirit having more control over matter. But we're still in a planet and in a state where matter exerts a great influence. So having this awareness, having this notion while we are awakening our consciousness is pivotal in our transformation, in the moral transformation. So enlightenment, which is the state, like I said, we're all marching towards perfection as spirits, as immortal spirits. We will one day get there. As we're marching towards that, the state of enlightenment is the state we can think of where the spirit has already ridden itself from all the imperfections, all its impurities. It is depurated, it's purified, and is in complete harmony with the laws that govern the universe, complete harmony with God. And to finish here today, I wanted to read a small passage by the spirit author Joanna de Angelis, when she said, in your origin, you are light advancing toward the great light. There are only shadows because you have not yet set yourself to move the powerful generators of dormant energy within you. Bring forth clarity, beginning with the spark of goodwill and letting it grow until it reaches all the strength at your disposal. Love is your path, for it proceeds from God who created you. Jesus is our path and our model and our guide, the way, the truth, and the life, the one who showed love without selfishness, forgiveness without resentment, humility without weakness. So let us use Jesus as our guide, understanding that the awakening of our immortality, the awakening of the consciousness, is the dawn of a new humanity, and each one of us has a part to play in that. May the peace of Christ be with us always. Thank you so much.